Hi, my name's Gary Cordingley and I'm a storyteller living in Falmouth, which is in Cornwall in the southwest tip of Britain, the little bit that sticks out at the bottom there, for those of you that don't know. And I'm delighted to be here at the World Storytelling Cafe on this beautiful, beautiful sunny afternoon. And I'd like to thank everybody who's involved in the organising and the running of the World Storytelling Cafe. It's a fabulous platform for digital storytelling in these troubled times. And I'd also like to say to John Rowe that I hope that you are recovering. I know that you had a fall just recently, so I hope that you are recovering from that. And that you're well. And I'd like to say that I hope that you are all well, wherever you are in the world. I'd like to share with you a tale that I heard told by David Heathfield, the storyteller. And he's been releasing a story every day throughout pretty much since the beginning of the lockdown under the title of A Breath of Fresh Air. And thank you for those, David. It was very generous of you to share those tales with us. And the one that I'd like to tell you now is probably the first one that I heard him tell. And that was a story from Korea. And it's about two brothers whose father had recently died and left the land between them to share. And they decided that they would divide the land completely in half because it was equal amount of paddy fields. It was a rice farm, equal amount of paddy field for both of them. And so they worked tirelessly throughout the growing season, preparing the land and planting the seeds and tending to the plants all throughout the growing season, from the first light until dusk. And when harvest time came, they worked, each of them in their fields, working hard, harvesting the rice and then processing it and putting it into their store sheds. And then they had a great feast to celebrate the harvest. And after that feast, the two brothers went back to their own homes. Now, the elder brother was lying in bed and he was thinking to himself, my younger brother has just got married. And you know, I think that his needs are greater than mine. I would like to share some of the rice that I have in my store with my younger brother. So that evening, he had filled a small sack with some rice, and he'd, under the cover of darkness, put that sack over his shoulder and made his way across the land until he came to his brother's house. He knew well where the store shed was, and opening the latch very carefully, he crept in and he emptied the bag of rice onto the pile of rice in his brother's store shed and then made his way back home again. Well, after the feast the night before had finished, the younger brother, he had laid in bed and he had thought to himself, my elder brother, you know, he has a large family and I am living here just with my new bride and I have so much rice and his needs are so much greater than mine. I'd like to share some of my rice with my elder brother. So the next evening, he also filled a small sack with rice and under the cover of darkness, put that sack over his shoulder and made his way across the land until he came to his brother's farm. And knowing well where his brother's store shed was, he made his way into the store shed and emptied the sack of rice onto the pile in his brother's shed and then went home again. Well, in the morning, both brothers woke up and going to their store shed to get rice for their morning meal, were astonished to find that the level of rice had not diminished at all from the night before when they had carried the rice across to their brothers. And this was a bit mystifying. But anyway, that evening, both brothers, exactly the same thing, filled a sack with rice over the shoulder and across the field to their brother's house under the cover of darkness and into the shed and poured the rice onto the pile with all the other rice that was there. And then made their way back home again. And the next morning, going into the store shed, were surprised once again to find that the levels of rice had not shrunk at all. And so this went on for a few days until one night, each of the brothers, having filled a sack with rice, was making their way across the land to their brother's farm, their brother's house. And maybe there was a little bit of moonlight this evening. So as they crept across the fields in the darkness, they spied somebody coming the opposite direction, each of them. And because it was dark, they couldn't quite make out who it was. And at first, they thought maybe it was a vagabond or a bandit, somebody come to steal rice from their house, from their home. But as they got closer, they realized each one that they were looking at their own brother. And when they realized that each one of them had a sack of rice over their shoulders, they then understood why the levels of rice in their own sheds had not been going down. And they laughed, and they threw out their arms, and they hugged each other, and they celebrated the love that passed between the two of them and the care that they had each for the other and for the other's family. And that's the story. Thank you for that, David. I hope you enjoyed it. So this is a story from Senegal. There was once a wealthy man who lived in a village. He travelled a long road between villages on a daily basis. And every day, as he made his way from his village to the next village and back again, there was a hut by the side of the road. And sitting outside that hut was an old man who was so poor. It's almost like he had nothing in the world. But he did have a little anvil, and he did sit at his little anvil with his little hammer and bash away at bits of copper, bits of silver, and he made tiny bits of jewellery. And as he tapped away making that jewellery, oh, how he sang. He sang with such joy and laughter in his eyes, and he greeted everybody who walked past him, including the rich man that I'm telling you about. And this rich man couldn't understand. How come? He seems so happy. And he's always laughing and singing and always full of joy. And yet he's so poor. And so one day he stopped and he asked the old man, why is it? What is it that makes you so happy that you can sing and tell jokes and laugh in the midst of your poverty? And the old man said, well, it's simple, really. I have very little. In fact, I have practically nothing. And because I have so little, then I have nothing to lose. And if I have nothing to lose, then I am free to be happy. That is my secret. The rich man thought about this. He thanked the old man and made his way home. And that night he was sitting in his room and he was thinking, you know, I spend so much time thinking about the money that I have stashed in the back of my hut, thinking that somebody might creep in one day whilst I'm at work and steal all of my money. Somebody might creep in one night whilst I'm sleeping and kill me and steal all of my money. And so I feel miserable and unhappy because I'm always worrying about my money. Maybe if I gave my money to the old man and I had nothing, then I wouldn't feel so miserable. So the very next day, he made his way along the road till he came to the old man. And he said, old man, I have a gift for you. I would like you to take this and consider it yours. And he gave the bag of money to the old man. The old man looked at him slightly perplexed. And then he bid him farewell and made his way along the track. And as he walked along the tracks, do you know what? He suddenly felt a little bit lighter. He felt like the sky was a kind of a richer blue than it had been earlier on in the day. And the contrasting greens set against the blue of the sky were rich and deep and delicious. And the song of the birds in the air filled his heart with a kind of joy. And something happened suddenly that had not happened for a long time. A smile came across his face. And, you know, he began to hum a little tune. And he walked all the way back to his village. And by the time he got back to his village, he was singing and greeting the people of his village, which was unusual. They'd not really seen that for, well, forever, actually. Meantime, the old man was sitting by his anvil, looking at the bag full of money, astonished. This was amazing. He thought, all this money for me? What have I done to deserve this? And so he took the bag of money and he put it in his hut. And he came back and he sat down at his anvil and he picked up his hammer and he picked up a bit of copper and he started to tap away. And, you know, instead of singing the song, he began to think, what if whilst I'm tapping away here, making this piece of jewellery, I don't actually hear somebody coming into the back of my hut and breaking in and maybe reaching under my mattress? and taking my bag of money. And he spent the whole day trying to find better hiding places for the money and sitting at his anvil and thinking, no, that will never do. Somebody will surely come and take my money. And what would it be like if this evening, whilst I was sleeping, they came, they knew that I had the money, and they came and they cut my throat and took the money from me. And it was the same the next day. And it was the same the day after. And you know, the people in the village, they looked at the rich man and they thought how transformed he was. He was so happy, always laughing now and greeting everybody and singing wherever he went. The people that walked along the road between the villages wondered why the old man was looking at them suspiciously and seemed to be so grumpy. Well, on the fourth day, or was it the third day? I don't remember. The fourth day, I think. The old man had had enough, and he went to the back of his hut and he picked up that bag of money and he walked into the village, and he knew where the rich man lived, and he went and he knocked on the door of the hut of the rich man, and the rich man opened the door. "Oh, hello, my friend," he said. "It's very nice to see you here." "Well," said the old man, "it's nice to see you as well. Listen, I've been thinking about it. All this money, don't need it. You have it." And he put it back in the rich man's hands, and he turned around and he walked away. And as he walked out of that village, do you know what? A little tune came into his head, and he began to hum that tune. And he walked back towards his hut, and the sky was bluer, and the trees were greener, and the birds were singing, and he was laughing and smiling. He sat down at his anvil, he picked up a piece of copper and his hammer, and he began to tap away, laughing and singing. And the old man, not the old man, the rich man, he sat down in his kitchen at his table, and he put the bag of money in front of him, and he began to think what he was going to do with it and about his situation. Because, do you know, he couldn't remember the tunes that he had been singing. He couldn't remember the jokes that he had been telling. He was only thinking, what if somebody came and tried to take this from me? I can't tell you what he decided to do with that money. I don't know whether he kept it. I don't know whether he gave it away, became charitable. I have no idea, because that is all that I was told. Thank you. I think that one of the positive things to come out of this whole situation around coronavirus and the lockdown has been a surge in online storytelling, which I have to admit, whilst it has been a great boon, has at times been a little bit overwhelming and a bit of a curse, because there's been so much choice and you don't know where you want to go and what you want to look at. The World Storytelling CAF has been a fabulous platform for digital storytelling almost from the outset. But also, storytelling clubs around the world have had to go online to hold their monthly or weekly storytelling gatherings, whereas they would normally be in a cafe or a pub or a bar or wherever. Social distancing has, of course, not allowed that, and so there they are online. And I've attended a few of those, and one of them was in Montreal in Canada, and they held their evening meeting at 7:30. For me, that's midnight, and so by the time we finish, I can be quite tired. But it's been fabulous, and I've heard some great stories, and thank you to Rob Coney for inviting me along to that. And one of the stories that I've heard comes from a woman who lives in Bangalore, and I haven't yet remembered her name properly. I haven't installed it in my head, and I just went into my rucksack and found that I'd left my notebook at home. So when I put this video together, her name will be just here in writing, hopefully, or I'll tell you myself. And this story is set in India, and it's about a man whose name, I believe, is Rashid. And Rashid was the richest man in the whole town. Oh, he was so wealthy. He was a merchant, and he owned several warehouses and had lots of people working for him. And he had a big house in the centre of town. And he was well-to-do, well-dressed. And every single day, he would walk from his house to one or other of the warehouses and spend the day in the office at that warehouse, working hard. He didn't get his money, he didn't inherit his money, he worked for it. He was a hard-working man. And every day, at the end of the day, he would take the takings from all of the warehouses collected, the money was brought to wherever he was, and he would put it into a purse, and he would take it home. And as soon as he got home, the first thing he would do would go straight to the secret room at the back of the house and hide the money in the secret hiding place. Not even his wife knew where that place was. And so one day, when the warehouse had been closed and everybody went home, and he had made his way back through the town until he came to his house. He walked into the house, greeted his wife, went straight to the room at the back of the house, reached into his bag to take his purse, the one that had 500 gold pieces in, only to discover that the purse wasn't there. He'd been robbed. Somebody must have reached into his bag and taken the purse with the 500 gold pieces in it. He had been robbed, and he ran to his wife and told her, "I've been robbed," he said. "Somebody has taken my purse, and I don't know what to do." And his wife said, "Well, who was the robber? Did you see them? What did they look like?" "But I didn't see anybody at all," he said. "When I left the warehouse, I had the purse. And when I came home and went to take the purse and put it into the safe hiding place, it was gone. I have been robbed." "Well, how much money was in the purse?" said his wife. 500 gold pieces, he said. 500 gold pieces, said his wife. "That's nothing to you. You're the richest man in the whole town. Everybody knows that you have almost as much money as the king, possibly. You wouldn't miss 500 gold pieces. I don't understand why you're so worried." "I'm worried, wife," said the rich man, said Rashid, "because that money is my money, and I worked hard for it." "Yes," said his wife, "but you could work twice as hard tomorrow, and you could make 1,000 gold pieces just as easily." "But I worked for that money today," said Rashid, "and it is my money, and I want it back." "Well, if you want it back," said his wife, "then maybe you need to walk back to the warehouse and see if you dropped it along the road, perhaps." "Oh, that's a good idea," he said, and he remembered in that moment why it was that he had married this beautiful and wise woman. And so he made his way back through the town, all the way back to the warehouse, but he didn't see it anywhere along the track. And so he made his way back, all the way back to his own home, and on the way home again, no sign of the purse. "It's no good," he said. "I've been robbed of 500 gold pieces, and I will never see it again." "Well, then you just need to let it go," said his wife, "and go to bed and sleep. Tomorrow is a new day." But he couldn't sleep. All he could think about was the things that he may have bought with the 500 gold pieces that were robbed from him. So he had a very restless night. And the next morning, when the sun came up and when it was a respectable time of day, he made his way to the palace of the king, a friend of his. Well, they were known to each other. And the palace guards brought Rashid to the king's presence. And the king said, "Ah, my old friend Rashid, to what do we owe this pleasure?" "Your Majesty," said Rashid, "I have been robbed, and I have had my money stolen. My purse with all my money has been stolen." "Well, this is terrible," said the king. Who was the robber? Did you see him? Can you describe him?" "No, I didn't see him. That's just the thing," said Rashid. "I was on my way home from the warehouse. The purse was in my bag when I left, and when I got home, it was gone. So somebody must have reached into the bag and stolen it." "Well, how much money was in the purse?" asked the king. 500 gold pieces, said Rashid. 500 gold pieces, said the king. "But you are the second wealthiest man in the town after myself. In fact, the rumour has it that you may even have as much money as I do. A man like you wouldn't miss 500 gold pieces. Why don't you just forget it and get on with your life? I mean, you could work twice as hard today and earn twice as many, 1,000 gold pieces." "Your attitude is very much the same as my wife's," said Rashid. "And the point that you are missing is that I worked hard for that money, and that money belongs to me, and I want it back." Well, the king, ignoring the insolence, that had been thrown in his direction, said, well, what exactly do you want from me, Rashid? And Rashid said, I want you to put out a proclamation in all the public places in the town, in the parks, in the squares, in the meeting houses, in the bars. Whoever finds my purse with my gold pieces in must return them as fast as possible, immediately, if not quicker. Okay, said the king, I can do that. But I ask this of you, Rashid. Whoever brings that purse back, if they bring it back with 500 gold pieces in it, that you will give them a reward, 10% of the value of the contents of the purse. 10%, said Rashid, but that's 50 gold pieces. Said the king. It's good to see that your power of mathematics has not abandoned you. Yes, that's what it is. Okay, said Rashid. Of course, whatever it takes, Your Majesty, if you would only do this thing for me, then let's consider it done, said the king. Now I have important business to get on with, Your Majesty. And Rashid left. By the end of the day, the proclamation had gone out to all the public places in the town, to the parks, to the squares, to the meeting houses, everywhere. And next morning, almost at first light, the palace guards came to the king and they said, Your Majesty, there's a beggar woman at the door in rags. She says that she has found the missing purse with the 500 gold pieces. Indeed, said the king. Bring her in and bring some food and something nice to drink for her and send for Rashid. And so the woman was brought and somebody went for Rashid. And the king greeted the old woman, the young woman, the beggar, and asked her to sit down and had food brought for her and provided, and she began to eat. And he said, so you have found the bag, the purse with the 500 gold pieces. Indeed, Your Majesty, said the woman, enjoying this delicious fare that had been brought for her. Show me. And so she took the purse and she showed it to the king, and there are 500 gold pieces in here. There are, Your Majesty, said the woman. Tell me this. Why did you not just hold on to the purse? I mean, you are obviously very, very poor, and this is obviously a great deal of money. And if you were to take this and keep it, then you could have lived the rest of your life without need, never to have been hungry, to have had the finest clothes and the best houses. Why would you return it? Well, said the woman, because it's not my money. I found it by the side of the road, and I didn't know who it belonged to, and I didn't really know what to do with it, and I was concerned. And then I heard your proclamation, and I knew I could trust you, and so I brought it to you. That's very good, said the king. I'm very happy. And in that moment, the guards came in with Rashid, and they said, Your Majesty, Rashid, and Rashid, breathless. Oh, Your Majesty. I said, this must be good news. You fetched me so early in the morning. Tell me, please, somebody has brought my purse. Yes, indeed they have, said the king. This woman here, she found your purse by the side of the road, and she has brought it back, 500 gold pieces still within it. Please count it. And Rashid poured the money onto the side and quickly, as possible, counted the 500 gold pieces. Is it all there? Said the king. It is, Your Majesty, he said. Thank you so much, putting the money back into the purse. And he turned to the woman and said, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so honest and bringing this back for me. And now I must take it home and put it into its safe hiding place before something else happens to it. And he turned and went to leave. Rashid, said the king, maybe you're forgetting something. Rashid stopped in his tracks. Forgetting something, Your Majesty? I'm not sure that I am. Did you not tell me? Did you not make a promise yesterday when we spoke that whoever brought your purse back, you would give them a reward of 50 gold pieces? Yes. Now that you say so, I remember that I did make such a promise. And do you know what, Your Majesty? Here's the thing. I suddenly remembered that not only did I have 500 gold pieces in this purse, but I also had 60 silver pieces. And those 60 silver pieces, they are not here, so she must have stolen them. The king was shocked, and he turned to the woman and said, Is this correct? Did you take 50 silver pieces from the bag? "No, Your Majesty," said the woman. I never touched silver pieces. There were none in there to be taken. Said the king. And he looked at Rashid. He said, "Do you know what, Rashid? A memory has just come back to me. That yesterday afternoon, I'm a very busy man, you know, and sometimes these things take a while to filter through. Yesterday afternoon, I was walking in the very same part of town where you lost that purse. And I also lost a purse containing 500 gold pieces. And so therefore, this must be my purse. And I thank you," he said to the woman, "for returning it to me." "Oh, one moment," said Rashid. "Now that I really think about it, I suddenly remember that the purse with the 500 gold pieces and the 60 silver pieces, well, silly me, they are actually at home in the safe room, in the safe hiding place. So that is, in fact, my purse with the 500 gold pieces in." "Oh, maybe it is," said the king, "but maybe it's my purse, the one that I lost when I was walking through the same part of town." And Rashid said, but Your Majesty, surely you can see that it is my purse. I mean, how could we prove that it was your purse? How could you possibly prove that it was your purse?" "Interesting question," said the king, looking at Rashid sternly. "Why don't you open the purse and take some of the coins that are in the purse out and have a look at them?" And Rashid opened the purse and he reached in and took out a handful of coins. "Look at those coins," said the king. "Tell me, do they have faces on them?" "Yes, Your Majesty, of course they do, each and every single one of them." "Now tell me this, Rashid, the coins that you have in your hand there, do they have your face on them or do they have my face?" "They have your face, Your Majesty," said Rashid. "After all, you are the king." "Yes, I am," said the king, "and I think that proves that those coins belong to me and not to you. Give them back." And so Rashid handed the purse to the king. "Thank you," he said. And he turned to the woman. He said, "Now listen, you take this bag of gold coins and you spend them in any way that you see fit. And may the rest of your life be happy and blessed. But promise me this, and you will promise me this, won't you? Should you ever come across the other bag, the one that Rashid lost, with his 500 gold pieces in, should you ever come across that bag, promise me that you will take it directly to Rashid and give it back to him in return for a 50 gold piece reward." "I promise, Your Majesty," said the king. "Very good. Then our business here is done. I'm a busy man. Thank you." And both Rashid and the beggar woman bowed and they left. That's pretty much how that day ended. And how the next day began, I couldn't tell you because I don't know. So thank you for that story and thank you for listening. There was once a great king of Jerusalem whose influence cast far and wide across the lands and countries of the Middle East. He was a very powerful king, a very wealthy king. They also say that he was a wise king. And there were hundreds of stories have been told about him. And this is just one. You see, this king had a very trusted and loyal servant, and indeed an old friend. And the servant knew that he could deliver almost anything that the king asked of him. And he became a little bit boastful about this. In fact, he started to tell people that there was nothing that the king could ask of him that he could not deliver. And word travelled on the back of the wind until it arrived in the king's ear. And he heard this. And he thought this was not a good thing, that his good friend and trusted servant should be so boastful. And so he felt that maybe he should try and teach him a little bit of a lesson. And so he sat and he thought about what he might do, and an idea came to him, and he called his servant to him. "My friend," he said, "there is something that I would really like you to do. I have heard that there is a ring that exists a special ring with a kind of magic about it. A magic that can, whoever looks at that ring, if they are happy, it will make them sad. Where, on the other hand, if they are sad, it will make them happy. That ring, that one, I would like you to go and find it and bring it to me. I give you 6 months. Now, be gone. His friend and servant bowed to the king and made his way out. Well, this was no great task, he thought. All I have to do is go down into the markets, the souks and the bazaars in town, and ask amongst the jewellers there. Somebody will surely have heard of such a ring. And that's exactly what he did. He made his way along the back streets and those great, beautiful open markets there, amongst all the stalls, seeking out the jewellers and the silversmiths, asking them, could you tell me of such a ring? Do you own such a ring? And they all looked at him. No, my friend, I've never heard of such a thing. I'm not even sure such a thing exists. Well, the days rolled by and he had visited all of the places in Jerusalem where he thought that he might find such a ring, or somebody with knowledge of that ring. Or so he thought, anyway. And he began to think that this was a slightly more difficult task than he had at first anticipated, and that he would have to spread his net all the wider. And so his travels took him further and across the borders and into other countries. And his time was being eaten up, and his money was being eaten up as he made his way around the great cities, asking the jewellers, the market stall holders, the tradesmen, everywhere he went, and still nobody knew. Well, time was running out, and he made his way back to Jerusalem. It was on the eve of a great festival. And he made his way to the palace, and this was the end of his 6 months. So he had to go straight to the king and tell him that he had failed. But as he was walking through the city, he came across one of those open air markets, and it was towards the end of the day, and people were starting to pack up. And there was a stall by the side of the road, the path. And sat at that stall was an old man with long beard, and he had some jewellery set out in front of him. And the servant didn't remember seeing this man before, so he thought, well, what have I to lose? And he asked him, have you heard of, or have you seen, or do you possess this magic ring? This magic ring that whoever should look at it, and they are happy, when they look at it, it will make them sad. But if they are sad and they look at the ring, it will make them happy. And the old man said, well, I don't have such a ring in my possession, but I think I might be able to help you. Yes, he said, just one moment. And he reached out, and there was a stick display on his table. There was some simple gold and silver bands. And he took the gold band, and he took an engraving pin, and he wrote some words, some symbols onto that ring. And he passed it to the servant, and the servant looked at it and said, do you think this will do the job? Well, it may, or it may not, said the man. But why not take it and try? And as I said, the servant knew he had nothing else to lose. So he thanked the old man, and he paid him some money, and he made his way to the palace. And when he got to the palace, the feast that I told you about was in full swing. There was musicians playing music, and there were dancers dancing, and there were tables laid out with the finest foods, and there was wines, and there were people laughing and drinking and eating, servants coming with platters of meat, and all people, fine people wearing the finest of clothes. Everybody was enjoying themselves. And the king was sat on his throne, and the servant saw him. He was laughing, sharing a joke with one of his guests. But he looked up and he saw the servant, and he remembered that this was the day that he had told the servant to come back with the special magic ring. And so he called him across. The servant went across to the king. Your Majesty, he said, "Have you brought me what I asked of you?" said the king. "I have, your majesty," said the servant. "Then let me see." And so the servant held up the ring, and the king took it joyfully from his hand. "You've done well," he said. "Let's see what kind of magic this ring holds." And he looked down at the ring, and he read the symbols that were written there. Then he looked out at all of the people, all of his guests, who were making merry and enjoying themselves here in his court. And as he looked at them, he thought that soon they would all leave, and the merriment that they had brought to his palace, and the musicians and the fine foods and all of this would be gone, and the solemnness would fall back upon the palace. And after a very, very short while, he clapped his hands and he sent them all away. The servants, the musicians, the dancers, the singers, all of the fine foods, and all of his guests. But they weren't quite sure what had just taken place, but they could see that he was full of sadness, and they imagined that he must have received some very, very bad news. And so they left, and they thanked him for the feast, and away they went. The king sat and considered what had just taken place. The fragility of life, how everything that is there now will be gone tomorrow or one day in the future. And a kind of darkness filled him, and all of his joy had poured away. And he began to worry that this sadness would fill him and consume him for all of his life. It was the kind of darkness he had never felt before. And in that moment, he looked down at the ring in his fingers, and he turned it around, and those symbols went by once again. And he looked at them, and he thought about what they said. And as he thought about it, he felt a glimmer of hope in his heart. A glimmer of hope like a bright, shining star, tiny at first when it comes out as day turns to night, and the darkness is not yet dark enough for it to show its fullness. But it grew, and as it grew, it cast light into his heart, into the dark corners of his spirit, of his soul. And he realized that there was still a chance for happiness. And in that realization, the light flooded back into him, and a smile came across his face as he realized that his friend and trusted servant had in fact found the magic golden ring that he had asked for. A ring that would make a happy man sad, and a sad man happy when he looked at it. For the words on that ring, although in their original language I could not tell you, but translated, those words say, "This too shall pass." And he knew that that dark feeling would eventually pass. And he called his servant to him, and he congratulated him on finding this ring and bringing it to him. And he took from his own finger a golden ring with a huge, huge ruby, an expensive ruby encrusted, and he passed it to him for his troubles. And he put in its place the ring that he had brought to him. And there wasn't a day in the rest of his life that king did not look at that ring just to remind himself, whatever situation they found himself in, that too would pass. And you don't need me to explain the significance of that story. So I would just like to thank the storyteller from whom I got that, and to thank you for listening. Well, there we have it. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to my stories this afternoon. I've certainly enjoyed sharing them with you. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed it, if you enjoyed the stories, and if you're able to, but obviously not everybody is, and that's fine, just have a look down there underneath this post, and you'll see the digital hat. And if you've got a few digital coins that you could drop into that hat, then I would be really, truly grateful. As my living has kind of come to a ground to a halt with lockdown. And don't forget to go and look at the other storytellers at the World Storytelling CAF also. And so, yes, so it leaves nothing more for me to say than stay well and stay safe, and see you next time. Thank you.
Young and old, you've been listening to a wonderful storyteller. And if you really liked it, if you've got a little money, doesn't have to be a lot. A little goes a long, long way, as they say. And you can afford it. Just pop it into the storyteller's hat, because right now they're not earning at all, so whatever you've got, it will be appreciated. And I'm sure you parents will have set a good example for your children. Oh, it's lovely. I'm only joking. But it will keep some of us going through this crisis. And those of you that are self-employed out there will know exactly what I mean, and you're probably exempt.